Alternatively, they could go ahead and vote for a bill that we've said would definitely strengthen the economy, and that is giving everybody who's making $250,000 a year or less certainty that their taxes aren't going to go down next year. That would make a big difference. Now, obviously, the Republicans have voted that down already once. It's not likely, realistically, that they're going to bring it back up again before Election Day. But my hope is after the election, people step back and recognize that that's a sensible way to bring down our deficit and allow us to still invest in things like education that are going to help the economy grow. So, Chuck Todd.
Mr. President, update us on your latest thinking on where you think things are in Syria, and in particular whether you envision using U.S. military, if simply for nothing else, as safekeeping of the chemical weapons, and if you're confident that some will come. But I also want to follow up on an answer you just gave to Nancy. You said that one of the reasons you wanted to see Mitt Romney's tax returns was you want to see if everybody is playing by the same set of rules. It actually goes to the question she asked, which is this implication: do you think there's something that Romney is not telling us in his tax returns that indicates he's not playing by the same set of rules?
There's a difference between playing by the same sets of rules and doing something illegal. And in no way have we suggested the latter. But the first disclosure, the 1 years of tax returns that he disclosed, indicated that he used Swiss bank accounts, for example. Well, that may be perfectly legal, but I suspect if you ask the average American, do you have one? And is that part of how you manage your tax obligations? They would say no. They would find that relevant information, particularly when we're going into a time where we know we're going to have to make tough choices, both about spending and about taxes. So, I think the idea that this is somehow exceptional, that there should be a rationale or a justification for doing more than the very bare minimum, has it backwards. I mean, the assumption should be you do what previous presidential candidates did dating back for decades. And Governor Romney's own dad says, well, the reason I put out 10 or 12 years is because any single year might not tell you the whole story. And everybody's, I think, followed that custom ever since. The American people have assumed that if you want to be President of the United States, that your life's an open book. When it comes to things like your finances. I'm not asking him to disclose every detail of his medical records, although we normally do that as well. I mean, this isn't sort of overly personal here, guys. This is pretty standard stuff. I don't think we're being mean by asking you to do what every other presidential candidate's done, right? It's what the American people expect. On Syria, obviously this is a very tough issue. I have indicated repeatedly that President al-Assad has lost legitimacy, that he needs to step down. So far, he hasn't gotten the message, and instead has doubled down in violence on his own people. The international community has sent a clear message that rather than drag his country into civil war, he should move in the direction of a political transition. But at this point, the likelihood of a soft landing seems pretty distant. What we've said is, number one, we want to make sure we're providing humanitarian assistance, and we've done that to the tune of $82 million, I believe, so far, and we'll probably end up doing a little bit more, because we want to make sure that the hundreds of thousands of refugees that are fleeing the mayhem, that they don't end up creating or being in a terrible situation, or also destabilizing some of Syria's neighbors. The second thing we've done is we said that we would provide, in consultation with the international community, some assistance to the opposition in thinking about how would a political transition take place, and what are the principles that should be upheld in terms of looking out for minority rights and human rights, and that consultation is taking place. I have at this point not ordered military engagement in the situation, but the point that you made about chemical and biological weapons is critical. That's an issue that doesn't just concern Syria, it concerns our close allies in the region, including Israel. It concerns us. We cannot have a situation where chemical or biological weapons are falling into the hands of the wrong people. We have been very clear to the Assad regime, but also to other players on the ground, that a red line for us is we start seeing a whole bunch of chemical weapons moving around or being utilized. That would change my calculus. That would change my equation.
It's somehow understated.
In a situation this volatile, I wouldn't say that I am absolutely confident. What I'm saying is we're monitoring that situation very carefully. We have put together a range of contingency plans. We have communicated in no uncertain terms with every player in the region that that's a red line for us, and that there would be enormous consequences if we start seeing movement on the chemical weapons front, or the use of chemical weapons. That would change my calculations significantly. So, all right. Thank you, everybody.
President Obama saying to Chuck Todd that if there were any evidence of chemical or biological weapons in Syria, that would change his calculation about getting involved militarily. That is a red line, he said. He said that has been communicated, that we have communicated that not only to the regime but to all of the players in the region. A very important statement from the President on Syria. Also said that he had talked today to the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs, General Martin Dempsey, who is in Afghanistan, about their concerns about the uptick in the deaths of American forces, the so-called green on blue violence there, and that they're trying to improve the screening, the Angel system as well, the Buddy system, as well as the screening, the intelligence of Afghan troops as they become standing up in this transition and American withdrawal. Here at the table now, Steve McMahon, a Democratic strategist, and former Republican Chairman Michael Steele. Of course, the first questions had a lot to do with Todd Akin, his comments, and the President said, rape is rape. How difficult is this for the Republican Party? We now, since we've been sitting here, we hear from Kelly O'Donnell that the chairman of the Republican Senate Campaign Committee, Senator John Cornyn of Texas, has told Todd Akin in no uncertain terms publicly, has issued a statement saying, take the next 24 hours and do what is best for you and your country and the Republican Party. This is not such a gentle shove to get out of the race.
No, it's not. It's you know, I hear people saying it's an unfortunate comment and all. That's stupid. I mean, it's just amazing that someone could sit there on a subject as powerful and hurtful as rape, categorize it the way he did. It does, as was talked about this morning on Morning Joe and a few other shows, it reflects the mindset of this individual going into the Senate campaign. And
he's not qualified to be a senator.
In my estimation, no. And I think that, you know, I applaud the Senate leadership that is probably quietly, certainly, and now publicly saying, rethink this bid and do the right thing. And so whether or not Akin takes that advice remains to be seen. I know his comments are so far, yeah, you know, I said something that was unfortunate, but there's no indication that he's going to take that advice and rethink over the next 24 hours what he should do.
What leverage do they have? They can withhold money from him.
They can withhold money, but look, he was backed by his community. The people elected him in this district in the Republican primary. Unless and until there really clamors from the grassroots for him to do something, I don't think that pressure from Washington, in fact, that may play and have the opposite effect.
In fact, he was just on Mike Huckabee's radio show in the hour saying he's not going to drop out.
Yeah, exactly.
He has till 5 o'clock tomorrow.
Well, that's what they always
That's
say.
what they
heard.
We heard that from a lot of these guys, right, Steve? So.
What about the bigger question, Michael, before I bring you into this, Steve? The bigger question for the party, you've got a 15-point gender gap in some states, in battleground states.
Right.
You needed to close that for Mitt Romney to win.
Right.
And he has a big advantage with men, but he is lagging farther behind than most Republican candidates in recent years with women. We've had all of these other issues come up with women's health and rights to reproductive freedom.
As a brand, this does not help close that gap. In fact, I think it widens it in many respects because it affirms and pushes forward a narrative about the GOP and women and health issues and their rights that the GOP has faltered on over the last 8 months or so. The Romney campaign has been, I think, a little bit quiet on this, as they probably should, to see how it plays out. And it makes sense. You don't want to go jumping into these things headlong. But again, as the standard bearer now for the GOP going into the convention, whether it was this or the dipping into the Sea of Galilee by members of the GOP caucus, the branding and the messaging going into the convention is not good, is not helpful for the Romney campaign, nor is it helpful for the party writ large.
Steve McMahon, has Mitt Romney and his running mate, Paul Ryan, they immediately put out a statement last night. But Paul Ryan, before he joined the ticket, was a co-sponsor with Aiken on one of these very, very restrictive rape laws, and also supported persons.
If you look at Paul Ryan's position on abortion, and I'm not talking about his position on legitimate rape, because nobody has the position that Aiken took, it's basically the same as Aiken's position. He's against abortion in just about every case unless the health of the mother is jeopardized. So that's not the position that most women take. It's not a position that is going to be effective for the Republican Party in terms of closing the gap. I think you can see where this thing is going by looking at where Mitt Romney has been. Last night he issued that statement. He issued a statement not too dissimilar to Senator Cornyn's just a little while ago, in which he basically sort of said, he initially had said, we have to evaluate it, it's not our view. He's now denouncing it in very, very strong terms, and I think the Republican Party is basically saying to Mr. Aiken, it's time to get out of this race, and you have till 5 o'clock tomorrow to do it.
Is this a moment of change? Is this an inflection point, Michael?
I think it could be. I mean, I think for Romney, it's a chance to really put his imprimatur on the party. Something like this gives him an opportunity to kind of rebrand the messaging. That's, as you said, Steve, a very strong response denouncing something like this. It can be very helpful, but again, it has to be consistent. And that oftentimes becomes a problem in these things.
Well, this conversation will continue. Michael Steele and Steve McMahon, thank you both very much. Of course, we heard from the President directly. His